Okay, I am going to get started. Everyone can see my screen, right? Okay. Okay. So welcome to this front-end lab. Basically, I'm going to be going through making this weather app using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So I'm going to go through the first half, which is just like the HTML and CSS, and then Amir is going to join later and do the JavaScript portion. And so as you can see, it's a weather app with text that says how's the weather today, a search bar, and then like a display for the weather. So if I search a random city like Denver, then it'll change. The weather will change based on the city that I search. Yeah, okay. So with that, I'm going to get started. And the first thing I'm going to have you guys do is go to Open Weather API. Just search it on Google, and you should go to this one, openweathermap.org. Might take just a little bit to load. But when it loads, create an account and then generate an API key. So click sign up and generate an API key, and then, or click sign up. Then once you create an account, go to your account page, click API keys, and then you can just click, like type in a name, like Frontend Lab. I already have one called that. You click generate and it'll make a key for you. And this will be important for the JavaScript portion, but I'm having you do it now because it takes some time to activate. So I will give a couple minutes to do that. The other thing that I'll have you do is make a folder, and 3 files will be in that folder: index.html, script.js, and style.css. So I'll give everyone a couple minutes to do those 2 things. Can I show that again? Okay, so to reiterate, go to search up Open Weather API, go to the website. Okay, let me see if I can make this bigger. Okay, yeah, and then I'm already signed in, so it shows my profile there, but it'll have there should be a button that says sign up. So make an account for that and then go to my API keys. All right, click API keys. Also, as a note on homework 4, there is starter code. I'm not sure why the website doesn't have it, so we'll fix that tonight and make sure that that one is released homework 4. But yes, there is starter code homework 4. Can you also extend the deadline? I will talk to the other instructors, but I'm pretty sure that's going to happen because we're kind of delayed on releasing the starter code. So yeah, I'm pretty sure the deadline is extended, but don't quote me on that. I'll talk to the other instructors. What do you click? Okay. So after you've made an account, go to your profile page and then click API keys. Mine is like a smaller view, so it looks a little bit different, but you should be able to find a section that says API keys. And then once you do that, type in a name for your API key, like Frontend Lab. I already have one called that, so I'm not going to make another one. And then click generate. Okay. I think I will move on because we have a lot to cover in this demo. So let's get, if you don't have your API key, don't worry. I'll try and go a little bit slower through the HTML. So I'm just going to get started right now. So if you have your 3 files made, go to your index.html and we're going to start with that first. And as always, you can right click on the file, click copy path, and then paste it in the browser so that you'll see your changes in the browser. But I already have mine open, so I'm just going to keep it. Okay, so to start, I'm going to make a basic HTML template. So the shorthand for that is to do HTML:5 tab, and then it'll make you this like starter HTML. Obviously, there's nothing in the body, so the page will just be blank. The one thing that I'm going to change is I'm going to change the title to say weather app demo, just so it doesn't say document, and save and refresh. Okay. So this shorthand, the HTML:5, will only work on VS Code. So any shorthand that I use is on VS Code specifically. So if you're using a different editor, I'm not sure what the shorthand for that is. Okay, so if we look at this page, we see a couple elements going on. First, there's the title with this text. Then there's like the search section with an input box and a button. And then there's this like content section. So that has like the city name, an image for the weather, the actual weather description, and then temperature, and this little icon. So those are the elements of the page. So I'm going to build out the skeleton for that. And the first thing I'm going to do is create like an outer div to wrap everything around. And again, I'm going to use shorthand. So if you just do dot card tab, that'll create a div with the class name card. So you just do dot class name tab, and that'll create a div with that class name. That's the shorthand. And inside of that, I'm going to have a h1. And in that, it's going to say, how's the weather today? So I'm just going to copy directly. Okay. Yeah, and that shows up right there. Underneath that, I'm going to make another div for the search section. So I'm going to call that search for that. And this search section has an input. Type equals text, and then class name, search bar, search dash bar. And I think that's just how the inputs work. Yeah. And I'm also going to make a button. The button is going to have a class name, search button. And inside this button, I'm just going to say go, like that. All right. And if I refresh, you can see the input and the search button. Okay. And moving on to this section, we see there's like 4 different things. So I'm just going to separate out this like content section and create another div for that. So I'm going to call it weather. And then inside that, I'm going to have another div for the location, and that's this. And that'll have 2 things. The first is like the little icon, and the second is the city name. So for the city name, I'm going to make an H2. And for now, I'm just going to do Berkeley as a placeholder. And to get the image, we're actually going to use an extension for that. So in VS Code, click on this icon with the 4 boxes, 2 extensions, and then search for React icons. It should be this one. I already have it installed. So go ahead and install that. How do you make it pop up all the HTML instantly? Use the command HTML5, and then click tab. That shorthand works in VS Code. I sent it in chat. Okay, so install this extension with a bunch. It's like basically an icon pack, and then go back to your index.html. Oh, on the website? Oh, on the website. So right click on index.html, copy path, and then paste the path in your browser. It doesn't appear instantly. I have to save my index.html and then refresh the page in order for it to show up, if that's what you meant. Okay, back to this. So in VS Code, you want to do Command-Shift-P, type in React icon, and then that'll open up this extension pack. And in this extension, I'm going to search for a location, and then I'm going to choose this one, this icon that says, oh, what does it say? High location marker. I'm going to copy the SVG and then just paste it, just like that. And let's set up that. And there we go. You see a little icon right there. For this H2, I'm also going to add a class city. Okay, do people want me to repeat that? So I'm going to do this again, command with border and outline. So now you see it's just like a floating box with text. So now I'm going to change the background color to this gray color. Hex code for that is A4, A0, A0. No, not a colon. And I'm also going to add a border radius because the search bar is rounded. So I'm going to do 22 pixels for that. Not as rounded because it's not as rounded as the button. The other thing I want to do is add a margin, 0.5 EM. Again, same as the button, just adding more space. Let's just refresh. Yeah, we can see it there. And I also have to add some padding. And what the padding will do is increase the size of this search box. So I'm going to set it 0.8 EM and 1.2 EM. So this will add padding horizontally and vertically. That's why there's two numbers next to the padding. As you can see, the box increased in size. And also here, the text is black. I'm just going to change it to white. So again, color white for the font. Same font weight. And font size of 105%. And what this essentially means is that I want the font to expand the box a little bit more. Oh, what did I? Oh, semicolon. Yeah, now the box is slightly bigger. And lastly, I just want to increase the width of the search bar. So I'm going to do width 30 feet W. And that'll increase the width. Okay. Are there any questions about the CSS that I just went over? I went over a lot. What is outline none about? So here, let me take this out and show you. Input boxes by default have an outline. So this is like when you click on it, you can see like this little purple ring. That's the outline. So the outline only shows up when you click on an input box. So I'm just removing that because I want it to look cleaner and not have that purple ring outside. So that's what outline none is for. So now when I click on it, you see nothing. Okay, any other questions? Does it affect input tag only? So this entire search bar class is only for the input box. So yeah, it's only affecting the input box. But if you're talking about outline specifically, that's just like a default for HTML input boxes that they have outlined. Okay. There are no other questions. I will now pass it off to Amir to do the JavaScript portion. This like last section, I will not style, unfortunately, but I think it's more important to go through the JavaScript because that will actually get into the functionality, making this weather app work. So yeah, I'm gonna pass it off to him.
Thank you, Nitya. Yeah, we're gonna pause for like 1 quick minute. If anyone has any questions, in that minute, in the chat, I posted the front end lab solutions. You guys can take a look at this, but more importantly, if you're confused about the HTML or CSS, just copy those 2 files into a folder and we can get started with the JavaScript from scratch. Because from here on out, we're going to add functionality to the website. We're actually going to make it interactive. So if you're confused on the HTML, confused on the CSS, just copy it. You can rewatch this later or rewatch previous lectures. But for right now, just make sure that you have everything ready to hop into the JavaScript part, because the JavaScript part is going to be the most exciting. We're going to like, all the the functional elements of like making this website work. But anyway, thank you, Nitya, for the 2 previous parts. But I'll wait 1 minute. And in that minute, if anyone has any questions, feel free to ask. I don't know if Nitya, you answered Chi Tam Nguyen's question in the chat.
Yeah, I answered that out loud.
Okay, cool. Yeah, if anyone else has any questions, feel free to ask. But copy the HTML, CSS, and just start the JavaScript from scratch. Anime guy's back. That's true. That is true. This may be. I come at random times. You'll never expect me. I'm not even supposed to be here, truth be told.
What is that a panel of?
Instead of using the default one. Why do we have to generate an API request? Is that what you're asking?
Oh, I asked them to generate API keys in the beginning. You can use the default actually, but I just had you generate just in case, like for some people it didn't make one.
There's a key there's a key in the front end lab solutions in the script that you can use. I didn't generate my own key, but it's up to you.
You could also just use that key.
If you want to be cool, you can generate your own key, build your own website off of it. But I guess if you want to just do for fun, you can just use a default API key. Any case, let me share my screen. Okay. I don't see this. Cool. So let me copy this. Wait. I'm gonna hide this. Put this here. All right. Boom. Deleting. Oops. Wait. Okay. Let me have the chat open in the corner just so I can see. Okay, great. Now I'm gonna delete all this. Okay, so let's start. Up until now, if I refresh this, up until now, we just have our HTML here. Wait, can everyone hear me all right, by the way? Nancy, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, great. Up until now, we just had our HTML and our CSS. So it looks somewhat like this. If you have like some dummy data, it's going to display something underneath here. But now we actually want to make it interactive. We want to say, if I type into this like Berkeley and I click go, I want it to display Berkeley's weather information. If I, want to check out what's happening in San Francisco and press go. I want the weather information of any city that I can get. So we're going to start off with that. So going into here, the first two things I want to do intuitively is understand what functions I need to start generating. So there's two elements in this document here that are going to need to call some function when I interact with them. The first one is a search, right? Because I'm typing something in the search, and this information here is going to be what I'm going to access the weather information from. And if I click go, I have to have some function here that goes and does something, right? So intuitively, there's like two elements on this page here. And then I'm editing some other elements, right? So I'm editing, if you look at this, I'm editing this information here. I'm editing this scattered clouds, the temperature information, so this is like what we're going to get to. But if I do maybe like, I don't know, someone drop me a city in the chat. Nitya is from Portland. Are you from Eugene, Nitya, or Portland? Portland, right?
No, yeah, I'm actually from Portland.
Yeah. So where Nitya's from right now, it's like 68 degrees Fahrenheit. Sacramento, Daniel said. So here we go. So this is basically what we're going to get to. And we're going to get to this literally line by line in this JavaScript here that's less than 50 lines, which is exciting. So let me delete all of this. Actually, maybe a better thing to do here would just be to copy this down, and then we can go line by line. But I'm going to start, don't look at anything here. I'm going to start from down here. Okay. So starting from line 26, I mentioned that we need to get the values of something inside of the website, right? So we have this function here, query selector. So the document is our website. This is like the raw document, and it's just called the document in the document object model of HTML. The main layer is called document. There's a function in document called query selector, which basically goes through all of the classes in that document and finds the first one that matches the name of whatever you passed in. So it's going to look inside this document and it's going to find search button. If we forget what search button is, we can go into our index.html. And in our index.html, we see that we have search bar here and search button. So basically, this function is going to go through our entire document and it's going to find search button here. And then we're going to say, add an event listener. So what an event listener does is intuitively, it's saying, listen to some event happen and then do something, right? So here we're listening to click. So click is a default event. If you're ever curious about any event listeners or different types of like functions, just go to add event listener, event target dot add event listener. If you go to MDN web docs, you can find a whole bunch of different listeners. So the one that we're looking at right now is click. So when you click on an element, they'll probably have it somewhere down here. Where is it? Yeah, right here. So they have it in event listener where you can click. So you can get element by ID if this is an ID, but it's not an ID, it's a class, which is why we're using query selector. So if I, for instance, had, ID equals search button, then I would have get element by ID, but I don't. It's a class, so I'm going to do query selector instead. Okay, so back to what we're doing. Okay, so this add event listener click. So basically it's listening for a click. And once I click something, we're passing in a function. So the event listener takes 2 arguments. What's the event? And then what's going to happen when that event occurs. So on a click, this is an arrow function. It's basically like a Lambda function in Python. I'm sure you guys covered it. I think I also covered it in JavaScript 1. But basically, it's a function that is just automatically called once this event occurs. And this function is saying weather.search. So we'll get to that in a second. But basically, weather.search, you can think of it as like it's going to search for the weather when we click this go button. The second item we want to get is this input box, right? So we want to get this input box. We want to get the data in this input box, right? So the second thing is the document.query selector. So we're doing the same thing here. Instead, this time we're going for a search bar. If we're confused what search bar is, we go back to our HTML. We find search bar right here. And so it's going to say, okay, find this item here, and then adding an event listener key up. So key up is basically when you press a key down and then you lift it back up. That's a key up. There's a key down, but I think it's just more common to use key up. I'm not sure specifically why, but I'm sure you can read about it. But anyway, on key up. So if I type something in and I press enter, I want it to do something. And that something is going to be another function we pass in, which is going to be taking in an event. And event.key equals enter. Oh, yes. So basically, this function is a function that, so when we use key up, basically, when I press any key on my keyboard, when I'm in this search bar, our event listener is picking up every single time we hit our keyboard. Then every single time we hit our keyboard, that event is going to be sent to this function. So basically, we could have this event be like key or something. Or actually, it can't be key because the event has the key property. But basically, think of it as like, you can console.log it if it's more interesting for you. Actually, let's go ahead and do that just so we understand what's actually being passed in. This is always a great way to figure out like what's happening inside your code. If you're ever confused, just console.log something. So function event instead of event, you can do that. So I think stylistically, I didn't write this, but like I would do something like this. Events like that, yeah, this is what I would do probably. In any case, so we're taking an event and we're passing it into our function. So let's see what is being passed into this function event. We're automatically expecting it. Does function event return a function? Is it like a wrapper? Function event does not return a function. It is just simply a function that is called once this event happens. So on key up. So let's look at the console real quick. Let's clear this. Oops. Okay. Okay, let's look at this. So I'm just gonna test. Oh, wait. Weather dot search. Wait, what if I did? Document dot search bar console.log event. Cannot read properly using 0. Wait, sorry. Let me. It's because I didn't reload this, actually. That's why. Okay. Okay. So we're a console.logging event, right? So let me just clear this real quick. I have a finger. I'm going to press it on the keyboard. I'm pressing it down. Right as I lift my finger up, keyboard event triggers. Why does it trigger? Well, because we have a key up event listener on this input right here. Once this happens, it's going to, yes. So why don't you pass event parameter to click event? Well, because we don't need, we could do that. So event is actually passing in the current object of that, type. So this is what event's actually passing in. So keyboard event. So we're console.logging event. This is what's coming out. A bunch of things right here. But most importantly, what we care about is key, right? So event is actually, so once our event was triggered, so we have an event listener, which is listening to events happen. Our event trigger or our event listener is key up. Once key up is triggered, then our entire instance of that event is sent, right? So this event is basically everything that's happening in this input box at the time of the event listener, right? So that's why, because in this, right, we don't need anything in this button. We don't care. We always know, we know it's going to be go. This text never changes, right? And we don't care if it's clicked up or down or whatever. We just care if it's clicked, right? So we could theoretically pass in event here for this, but we don't need it, right? Like, why would we need event here? All we're doing is we're going to press this go, and then we're going to execute some other function that's unrelated to this button. Event is only if you want the contents of that specific item itself. So you have the event trigger, which is the key up, and then the event is passed in. Basically, everything that's happening in this input box is passed in right here. And then what we care about is key, right? So if you're ever confused, like, don't just look it up, like just console.log things, look it up. It's pretty easy to figure out. So with console.logging event, let's say I didn't know, what, let's say I didn't know what the property was that I'm looking for, right? So, I run this whole thing, I key up, let's clear this. So these are backspace keys. If I do E, I'm going to look into this. And I'm going to say, oh, there is a E here. And specifically, I want the enter. So when I hit enter, I want this key to trigger some search, right? So here I'm going to say if event.key enter, then I'm going to weather.search, right? And we'll get to weather.search in a second, but we're just understanding what are the event listeners in the elements right now. Okay, so we're here. Just to test if this works again. If I did Seattle, okay. This time I hit enter. I didn't click the button. Okay. Cool. So now weather.fetch weather Berkeley. Okay. What is this event listener? Event listener stops in okay, we don't care about this right now. Okay, so now let's get back to the top. So now we have event listeners for this search bar and this button. This is text that we're not going to change, but what's changing are these data, was this data underneath, right? So basically we're trying to change the information here based on the information we receive from our API. So we're going to get more into kind of like API handling and understanding APIs a little bit later in this semester. But for right now, all you need to understand is that an API is basically just, think of it as some storage of information. Okay. It's basically like some data set. And then once you interact with this data set, it can give you some information about anything, right? So I think, I'm not sure if we've already worked on the homework that's related to like the NASA imagery, or if we're even doing that anymore, but basically APIs are just information stored somewhere that you can interact with, and you can get some information from some data that's out there in the cloud. So you'll understand more about that one, what that means later. But in any case, we're going to create some variable here by saying let weather, and it's going to be a JSON object. Okay. And in this JSON object, we're going to define a few things. The first thing we're going to define is our API key. So you can copy this one here, or you can put in your own API key, whatever you want. But this is what we have to pass into the API in order for it to run properly. Some APIs don't care. You can just pass in like whatever you want and it'll return you whatever information. Some APIs are going to require keys. And later in the semester, we're actually going to build our own APIs so you can all understand actually how that works. But this API specifically requires an API key, which is why we need this. Sometimes we can call it without it, but this one does. So in any case, whatever, we're just going to use this API key. Okay. The second thing we're going to do here is we're going to have some fetch weather attribute inside this JSON that is going to be a function. And in this function, you guys can just copy down this code here. But basically what it's saying is fetch from this URL here, plus the city that we pass into fetch weather, plus the API key that typically goes at the end of our URL. Then we're going to get some response from the API. We're going to return this response into JSON data that we can then understand. Then we're going to take the data and then we're going to display weather. So what is display weather? Well, it's a function inside of this element. So in here, if that was all sounding confusing, all you have to understand is we pass in a city, we call the URL. The URL fetches some raw data to us. We turn this data into some JSON. Then we take this data and we pass it into display weather. Okay, so you can think of display weather data as some JSON relating to some weather information data. If you were really, curious, instead of actually passing it in, just do console.log of the data, and then you'll see what's actually being passed in. In fact, we'll do that right now just to show what's actually being passed into display weather. So we're saying this on display weather data. Instead of doing that, let's just console.log data. Okay. Let's come back here. Let's inspect this. Go into our console. Perfect. Now let's press go. Okay, wait. Let's just put. Oops. Let's remove this console.log because this is kind of annoying. Oh, we didn't reload this. My bad. Okay. So let's say Berkeley. Okay, great. So what is this data? This is the data that's being passed into display weather. Sorry, I'm reading this now. Response and data are just arbitrary variable names, right? Yes, but this is, it's standard. Okay, so in this specific instance, it is just variable names. Like it's just a parameter, right? This is an arrow function, right? We define this as our parameter. So these are all arrow functions that we're creating, right? Don't ever look at this and just be like, oh, it's some black box. Like, I don't really understand. You guys can all understand every single line of this for sure. So this is an arrow function, right? And this is, this is some parameter in the arrow function. And then we're saying some data is going to be sent back. We're expecting some data to be returned to us from our fetch function, right? So it's going to be some JSON of data, right? So then we're applying this, like, we're applying basically this function that turns our data into some nice readable JSON, which looks like this. So now our data, we're console.logging, and it all looks like this, right? I could name this test and console.logging test. And if I reran this, it would do the same thing, right? This is just a parameter that we're defining in an arrow function. Why can't you just do then response console.log response.json? You can do that. Yeah. You can do that. The reason why we don't do that is because a dot then, so this is an example of a promise. I'm not sure, Nitsi, did we go over promises yet? Or were promises taught? Yes, promises were taught. Okay, perfect then. So this is an async function. So JavaScript is single threaded, right? Which means that only one thing is happening at a time. So basically what we're saying is we're fetching this data. Sometimes fetching data from an external source might take a long time. And if we're executing a line without a dot then right after, we might get an error because let's say we have just the line after that says response JSON, right? Like take some response in response.json. Well, if this hasn't executed first, we have no response. So this dot then is basically saying, wait until this has been executed and then execute this. Then this dot then is saying, wait until this has been executed and then execute this. So it's actually waiting for a response and then it's going forward. The reason why it's important too is because we're expecting some data from the thing prior, right? So this response is a parameter that we're expecting from this fetch data, right? So if we didn't wait for it, theoretically it might work if this fetch was fast enough. But let's say that this fetch was actually slow, because sometimes some APIs are just bigger, your computer is slower, the connection is slow, whatever it is. Sometimes you won't fetch it as fast as possible. So you want to make sure that you're waiting for the response before you then do something with that response, right? Or else your code's going to error. So that's the reason behind that. Does that make sense? I hope it does. Okay, cool. So here we're then turning it into some JSON. And then we're again waiting for this function to happen. And then we're expecting that inside our data parameter. And we're saying console.log of this data. So what does this data look like? Well, it's just a JSON function. In this JSON function, we see some cool information here, like for instance, the coordinates. If you wanted to display that, we have the name here, time zone, visibility, and would you look at that? We have some weather information here in this weather JSON, which is all great. So one sec. We have some weather information here inside this JSON. So then we're going to use this in our next function. So let's get to the next function. So here, instead of saying console.log data, we're going to put this back, which is this.display weather data. So now we're going to create another piece of our JSON object, which is display weather. And display weather is going to be another function that's going to expect some data. And of course, it's going to expect data because we just got some data here and we're passing it into this, right? And we're using this because it's a part of this weather object, JSON object, or I should rather just say JSON. So it's in this JSON, which is why we're using this, and we're finding display weather and we're passing in data, which we just got from this whole sequence right here. So now we have this JSON data and we're saying const name equals data. So actually just to reiterate, perfect. So let's look at this data again, because this is what's being passed in here. So we're looking at this. We're looking at this function here, and we're going to say, we're going to create some name, const name, and we're going to set it equal to data as a total. So we could also probably do data dot name. Oops. I'm not sure why they just set it to just data itself, but probably either works. Then we're going to say icon description is data dot weather 0. So let's look into data. So this is a data object. Let's look into weather, and we can see that weather 0 has all of this information here. So we're going to get the icon and the description from here. Okay, so actually I see what they're doing. So I think this notation here is saying that match the name of our variable to the name inside of data. So if we just, I think, said this, we could just do this, for instance, and that would be okay. But if we do this, I think what it's saying is find name inside of data and create a variable called name and just set them equal to each other. Do we have to submit this lab anywhere? I think maybe Nitya can answer that question. I'm not sure. Okay, so icon and description are inside of data weather is 0. So we're going to see that indeed in data weather, the 0th element of the weather array, we know it's an array because it says it right here. The 0th element has a description and an icon. So we're going to take those two items here. The same thing for temp. So we're going to go into main, which is some JSON. And we're going to say temp, which is probably temperature, and it says 58.73. Country is in data.sys. So if we close these, where's sys? Oh, it's right here. It's another JSON. And then let's look at country. Indeed, it's right here. So we're going to take that information. Then we're going to console.log name, icon, description, temp, and country, just to make sure that we're getting the right thing. Then after that, we're going to do the same document.query selectors as we did before, except this time we're going to locate the actual icons that we displayed underneath in our HTML. So we had city, icon, contents, temp, and weather. So if we look back in our HTML, where is city? City. Oh, city is right here, and we set it the default to Berkeley, California. So we're going to query selector, and it's going to find city for us. Then we're going to access the inner text. And so it's important to note that every single HTML element has different attributes, right? Here we're doing inner text. Sometimes we're doing source if it's like an image. Sometimes, we're doing something else. So always just make sure to look up every HTML element and see how to access specific information inside of it, right? For instance, if we're accessing the information inside of an input, it would be different than accessing the information inside of just like a regular text, like a P tag or an H2 tag. But more or less, they're pretty similar, especially inner text is a really big one. So we're going to set the inner text equal to the name, which is what we just got over here, and the country. We're going to have a comma in between them. The second thing we're going to do is going to set the icon source equals to some weather information, some basic URL for these icons, plus the icon description that we basically found inside of the weather information. So if we go back into weather, we can see icon is some 03N. This is some icon that the weather API uses. So we're going to go into the weather API and we're going to ask, how did you get the object breakdown again? What do you mean by object breakdown? In any case, we're going to go to the API. How do you know to format that, the format for the URL, how to get that? So if you're ever confused, let's look at this website right here. 03N at 03N. Okay. How did you get the view of the web page like you see what the object JSON is? So you're saying, how do I see this object here? Is that what you're asking? Like in the console? You could do it two places. You could just go in here and display weather and say console.log data. Or you could also do it here. I just didn't reload this page. So this is from my previous reload, but you can like just console.log data here and you can see what we're passing in here. Wait, I mean, where do you get this link? How do you know the format for the URL? So you're saying for this image URL right here? So this is the open weather map API. I've never looked at this in my life, but I can see here there's an icon list. So the reason I know that it's supposed to be ordered like that is because they're telling us to order it like this. They're basically saying, we want you to have this URL first, then something, then the size of whatever that is, right? So whatever icon is being passed in here is correlated to something, right? So 03N, this is 03D. 03N is right here, right? So this is correlated to this icon specifically. So if you look up an API reference, it's always going to be in the API reference for like how to get the certain information from that URL. So in open weather, it's like this. Okay, hope that makes sense. Great. So let's wrap this up real quick. Then we're doing the inner text of the description and we're setting it to uppercase. This is just a function that's related to strings that's setting this to uppercase. Also, to the question that do we need to submit this? I don't think we're going to need to submit this anywhere. I'm pretty sure. I think this is just like cool information and it'll help you with like your endeavors on future homeworks and just like in general into web dev. Then we're setting the temp inner text. So temp is some, let's see, where is temp? Temp is a paragraph right here. So we're going to find temp. We're going to set its inner text to temp, which we get up here, plus degrees Fahrenheit. I don't know how this even got this icon, but you can look it up on your keyboard probably. And then we're doing .weather .class list .remove loading. So what is this doing actually? Weather. Sorry, weather. Oh, I see. So this is I think a little bit extra. But basically what we're saying is that we're going into weather. And then once we actually have the weather information, it's no longer going to be loading. It's just going to say like .weather instead of weather loading. This is a little bit extra though. I don't think you need to do this. You could just access this as like weather loading. But maybe like, I wouldn't have even done this in the first place. I would have just done weather. But I guess this is like a little bit of extra information that you can use. Okay. The last thing is we're going to, okay. The last thing we're going to do is if we're typing some information here, right? We have yet to actually, oops, let's just close this down. We have yet to actually like get the information from inside this input. So what's actually happening in this function, which is another function inside of our JSON, we know that because we just exited out of this last JSON object, we're going into a new one. We're going to have another function here. Again, this could be an arrow function. I'm actually going to make it one just because I like arrow functions. They're like just really nice and very commonly used in the industry. Another arrow function that's basically saying this .fetch weather. So fetch weather, again, we already defined it up here. We take in some city information. So actually this city, where is this city coming from? Well, It's coming from the document.querySelector.search bar. So search bar is actually this search bar right here. You can verify that by going to your HTML. And we're saying the value inside the search bar. So again, it's not the inner text for search for inputs, it's the value. So putting this all together, we're going to try it out. So once you have this, you don't have to worry about this information down here. It's unnecessary. So let's reload this. Basically what this is doing is just fetching it on a reload. So it's saying like when you reload, when the new page is loaded, we're automatically going to do this. But like we don't have to, we can just, reload and just start from scratch again. So just to demo this, we have Berkeley. Oh, wait, sorry. We do need this. This Go is actually rendering. Wait. Oh, never mind. We do need the last part. I'm sorry. The toggle button, Gallon ID toggle, listener, dark. Let's see if I reload this. Huh. What's happening here? Oh, wait, I might have broken something up here. Let me check something real quick. This dot fetch weather is not a function. Maybe I do need to do a function here. Huh. Okay, I don't know why the arrow function was not happy here. Oh, I know, I get it. I get why. It's because I see why. So search, I don't think you can put an arrow function as the first value of like a JSON. Why do I get a different result years upon engineering the same city, different degree? That's interesting. You get different temperatures. For what? What are you looking at? Portland or Berkeley? Berkeley. What do you get for the value of Berkeley? 58.37. Huh. Go into your console.log. Console.log your data here. Inspect it and go into your console. When you press this, oops. Wait. Console.log data. Oh, why are we not? Wait. Let's do it here actually. Let's do console.log data. Oh, I didn't reload my page. I keep forgetting to do that. So annoying. Okay. If you look into, wait, sorry, where do we get temp from? Temp is data.main. Okay, so my temp is 58.28. So maybe it's based on our API key. That's the only like reason why it'd be different. I guess every single API key has updated weather information by every certain amount of seconds. So maybe if you like switch it by the second or by every minute or so, it'll probably switch. But it's because we all have unique API keys. If we all have the same API key, it would all be the same. And we'll again get into more API keys later. Yeah. Oh, you're currently on my API key. That's weird. Huh. Who knows? I guess. I mean, if you console.log and whatever temperature is showing is whatever it's supposed to be, but I don't know. That's kind of interesting. If I rerun it, maybe. Yeah, I don't really know. That would be funny though. I guess oh maybe hmm. Yeah, that's information. That's interesting. I don't know. That is weird. Anyway, in that case, that's the end of today's lecture. Thank you all so much for coming. I'm not sure if there are any announcements that need to be made, but I'm sure just look out for Ed for any announcements. But other than that, I hope you all have a great day. Post any questions, and I hope this was helpful and interesting and a good introduction to kind of like combining all three disciplines together to make something pretty cool actually. So in any case, thank you all. I appreciate it, and have a good one. Bye bye.